Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 49, Euthyphro 9c to d. Although he hasn't been able to show Socrates, Euthyphro is confident that he will be able to show the judges in his case that the actions which he says are unjust are indeed unjust, and that all the gods hate these acts. Euthyphro says that if they hear him speaking, then it will be clear to them. Now Socrates says, Al accusontai an periudoces legen. But they will hear if indeed you appear to speak well. That is to say that the judges will think that they understand the situation and that everything is clear to them if Euthyphro uses rhetoric very well. If he appears to be speaking well, they will accept whatever it is he's saying. This doesn't work on Socrates, but it will work on the judges. This is a throwaway line at the beginning of Socrates' response, and nothing is made of it. Socrates continues, To dedesu en enois ham elegontos, kai prosemauton scopo. While you were talking, I had this thought, and I am examining it with regard to myself. E hoti malis dame Euthyphron didaxeien, hos hoi theoi hapantes ton toiuton thanaton heguntai adikon enai, ti malon ego me mathe kapar Euthyphronos, ti potestinto hosion tekaito anosion. If Euthyphro were to teach me as much as possible that the gods, all of them, believe that such a death is unjust, what more have I learned from Euthyphro what the holy and the unholy are? Theomises gar tutoto ergon hos eoiken an. For this deed, so it seems, would be hated by the gods. In other words, if this murder is unjust, and if all the gods hate injustice or unjust acts, then this unjust murder is hated by the gods, and what is hated by the gods is unholy. Much of this argument depends on things Socrates introduced into the argument. If we recall what Euthyphro had said at the beginning, he said that what is holy is what I am doing now, and what he was doing was prosecuting, not primarily because of any unjust act, but because there had been a killing within the household. He was afraid of pollution, miasma, and that was the reason he had to prosecute his father. When already prosecuting his father in a law court, he then has to stress that what his father did was unjust, in the same way that he stresses that what Uranos and Kronos did were unjust acts, even though in mythology they actually weren't. We should also remember how Socrates steered Euthyphro around to accepting that the gods hated injustice. They were in dispute over things which couldn't be measured, calculated, or weighed, and these things happen to be good things, beautiful things, and just things. And then Socrates focused in only on unjust things. So the gods hate unjust things and love just things. Euthyphro has gone along with that because it seemed to him that it fitted in with his position. The gods loved him because he was being just for prosecuting his father, who was being unjust. We can therefore blame Socrates for this conclusion that the unjust act is something hated by the gods, but this may be regarded as something which could have been inferred from Euthyphro's original position. So why is Socrates now wondering what he's learnt about the holy? He carries on. Alagar u tuto ephane arti horis mena to hosion kai me togar theomiseson kai theophiles ephane. But the holy and the unholy didn't seem to be defined in this way, for the hated by the gods appeared also to be loved by the gods. This goes back to the point made by Socrates that the gods are in dispute over such things as justice, good and beautiful, which cannot be measured. Therefore, there are things which are loved by some gods, which are then necessarily hated by other gods. Euthyphro had been surprised when Socrates had asked him why the gods were in conflict. They simply are. They have rivalries going back generations. It's not because they disagree about justice or goodness or beauty, simply because they hate each other, because they have rivalry. Then they decide to differ. Whatever one god prefers, some of the other gods will disprefer. By that argument, anything God hated is also God loved, and anything God loved is also God hated, because there are rival groups of gods. This goes against the other point made here, that this particular killing was unjust and all the gods hated that particular killing, as if they had all agreed in this one instance that this was unjust. They all agreed that this was unjust. Socrates seems to be deliberately obtuse here because they've already agreed that all the gods apparently think that this particular killing was unjust, and therefore all of them hated this particular deed. Therefore, in this particular case, the God hated is not also the God loved. Only in other cases where there is room for doubt, the God hated is also the God loved. Thus, strictly speaking, Socrates could have learnt about the unholy from this particular act of killing. Obviously, he wouldn't have learnt anything about holiness because this case is so complex in terms of the legal issues, and it has nothing to do with holiness at all, really. Saying that the God hated is also the God loved is irrelevant in this particular instance, but this is the excuse Socrates uses to develop the conversation in a new direction. Hoste tutumen aphie mise, O Euthyphron, so that I let you off this, Euthyphro. Finally, we can leave this argument and go on to something new. Let's see what Socrates has to offer. E boule, pantes auto hegeston theoi adicon, kai pantes misunton. Al ara tuto honun epan orthumethain to logo, hos homen an pantes hoi theoi misosin anosionestin, hod an philosin hosion, hod an hoimen philosin hoide misosin, udetra eam fotera, arhuto bule he min horistai nun peritu hosiu kai tu anosiu, digar colue o Socrates. If you wish, let all gods consider it unjust and let all of them hate it. I should say that there is an ambiguity in English when we say let something be. We could be making a hypothesis, or, as here, we could be commanding people in the third person. Let those slaves build a house, that sort of thing. And here it's interesting that they are commanding the gods. Let the gods consider this to be unjust. Another mood of the verb would have expressed the hypothesis, but Socrates chooses not to use it. I don't know what to make of this, but it needed pointing out. This, then, which we are now emending in the argument, that whatever all the gods hate is unholy, and whatever all the gods love is holy, whatever some love and some hate is either neither holy nor unholy, or both holy and unholy. In this way, then, do you want the thing about the holy and the unholy now to have been defined by us? Yes, Socrates, for what prevents it? It's interesting that Euthyphro agrees to this, considering it's so sloppy, and Socrates' formulation of it is as sloppy as the actual definition. Socrates is not saying that we should now suppose that all the gods agree on which things are just or unjust, but only that where they do agree that something is just, then they love it, and where they all agree that something is unjust, then they all hate it. And in those cases where they all love, then that thing is holy. And in those cases where they all hate, then those things are unholy. In every other case where the gods disagree, those particular things will be holy and unholy, or neither holy nor unholy. What is this? What are we talking about? This is not going to work. Given that the gods disagree on most things, then in any particular case we are almost certain to find that the case is holy and unholy and neither holy nor unholy. This is ridiculous. Now, what is interesting is that Euthyphro sees nothing wrong with this argument, and it seems to me that he's concentrating on this act of injustice, and he hears that this act of injustice is hated by all the gods, and this act of injustice is therefore unholy. We have to remember that Euthyphro has a special connection with the gods, which allows him to know when all the gods agree on what is holy or unholy, or what is just or unjust. He knows that the killing by his father was unjust, and all the gods hate that act. He also knows that his prosecution of his father is loved by all the gods, and therefore he is holy, or at least his action is holy.